So in this section of the presentation, I'll be covering Schoolsite Council requirements, including roles and responsibilities, composition, and selection. But before we get into the core of Schoolsite Council, we're going to ease our way in with a quick poll in the chat. So we often receive questions about the correct spelling of Schoolsite in Schoolsite Council. Should Schoolsite be written as one compound word, as shown here in example A, or two separate words, as in example B? Please take a moment to let us know your answer in the chat. Next slide, please. Well, dating all the way back to the 1970s, EDCO spells Schoolsite as one compound word, but LEAs often spell it as two separate words, hence the acronym of SSC. Just know that there's no right way or wrong way to compound the word or not. The choice is yours. If your answer was either A or B, you're correct. But for the duration of this training, we'll use a compound word version to keep in line with EdCode. And so what is the purpose of a school site council? Well, a great place to begin to answer this question is with why? Like, why establish a school site council? So policymakers and researchers across the country agree that those who are involved with schools and students on a day-to-day basis, we're talking about principals, teachers, other school personnel, and students themselves, can make some of the best decisions for their schools. This is why, as legislation has been added, amended, or repealed over the past 50 years, the establishment of school site councils under specific circumstances has remained steadfast in California Ed Code. So when seen only as a requirement for Ed Code, school site councils can be simply a compliance mandates that satisfies a what and a how. But on the other hand, if we think about a school site council inside out and first describe it with our why, we can inspire others and our school communities to view and join a school site council with purpose, cause, and belief. Beginning with our why inevitably leads to decision-making on the part of the council that can greatly and positively impact the education of the students and the school community. So last year, Anita shared this quote from her very first administrator training here at LACOE, and it states, "A vision without a plan is just a dream. A plan without a vision is just drudgery, but a vision with a plan can change the world." Successful school site councils are more than just a rubber stamp committee or a reproduction of the same. They know the why. They know why a school does what it does. They believe in the programs it offers, and they inspire the school community to implement and monitor those programs with the intention of transforming the lives of the students it serves. Their impact on the entire school community can be life-changing and thus define their purpose. So, when is a school site council required? Although all school sites are able to form advisory councils or committees on their own, there are specific circumstances when the formation and implementation of a school site council is required by law. Per Ed Code 65000B, a school site council is required when a school operates a program funded through the consolidated application, and when that program requires a school plan for student achievement, also known as a SIPSA or SPSA. LEAs ensure in the consolidated application that the SIPSA has been prepared in accordance with the law and that school site councils have developed and approved the SIPSA for each school participating in programs funded through the CONAP process. So in case you're not familiar with it, the consolidated application, also known as the CONAP, is an agreement between the LEA and the California Department of Education for the distribution of categorical funds from various federal programs. An LEA is defined by Ed Code section 64000A as a county office of education, a school district, or a charter school. So the CONAP has two parts: the spring submission, which is due each June, and then the winter submission, which is due each February. Part 1, in the spring, documents participation in federal grant programs for the upcoming year and provides assurances that the LEA will comply with the legal requirements of each program that it applies for. If you're wondering what you're promising to do upon receipt of the funds, you can click on the link provided here on this slide. Here, you'll find the assurances for all available federal programs. Part 2, in the winter, contains LEA entitlements for each funded program. For each federal program entitlement, LEAs allocate funds for the program as indicated by the program requirements. The expenditure budget pages in the school plan for student achievement must match the CONAP school site allocation page in the winter submission. So exactly which programs are we talking about? This slide shows the federal programs that are included and distributed through the CONAP. There's Title I, Parts A, C, and D, Title II, Part A, Title III, Part A, Title IV, Parts A and B, Title V, Part B, and Title VI, Part A. But please keep in mind that your district or your school may not be participating in all of these federal programs. Today's presentation on School Site Council and the SFP will primarily focus on the Title I program. Okay, so now back to School Site Councils. So if you're required to establish one by a federal program granted through the CONAP, such as Title I, or if your school was identified for CSI, TSI, or ATSI under ESSA, Ed Code is very specific on the roles and responsibilities of a school site council. First, a school site council is required to develop and approve the school plan for student achievement. This process involves annually reviewing and updating the contents of the plan, including proposed expenditures of funds allocated through the CONAP and the Local Control Accountability Plan. In addition, the SPSA must be developed with the review, certification, and advice of the school's English Learner Advisory Committee. Next, the school site council approves the SFP for their school and then recommends that SFP to the local governing board or body for approval. Additionally, the school site council is responsible for annually developing the comprehensive school safety plan, and this is unless this task is delegated to a school safety planning committee that meets Ed Code requirements. These requirements will be discussed in detail later on in this presentation. So who makes up a school site council? In these next slides, we'll be taking a look at the school site council requirements related to composition and selection. So the school site council is a selected group of school site representatives selected by their peer group, and it is made up of school staff, parents, possibly community members, and at the secondary level, students as well. Members of the school site council represent the composition of the school's population. One group of the school site council is school site staff, and it includes classroom teachers selected by classroom teachers employed at the school. Also part of this group are other school personnel employed at the school who are not teachers, selected by others personnel employed at the school. The school principal or their designee is also included here. In this staff group, classroom teachers must represent the majority of persons in this group. The second group completing the council includes parents of pupils attending the school, selected by parents of pupils attending the school, and or other members of the school community, selected by parents attending the school. The parents of pupils attending the school, because parents don't attend the school. As mentioned at the secondary level, students also make up the composition of the council and must be selected by their peers as well. These two groups together make up the school site council. In the next 3 slides, we're going to provide visuals for school site council composition because sometimes it can get a bit confusing. At an elementary school, the school site council shall be composed of 2 groups: school staff members, shown here in light blue, and parent community members, shown here in dark blue, representing parity between the 2 groups. That is, equal numbers of members between the school staff members and parent and community members. Here, using this visual, you can see that half of the school site council must be composed of school staff, which includes the principal or their designee, classroom teachers employed at the school, and other school personnel employed at the school who are not classroom teachers. The classroom teachers selected must also constitute the majority of the school staff members. Given that classroom teachers have to make up that majority of staff members on the council, the minimum number of teachers required is 3. The other half of the school site council must be composed of parents of pupils attending the school and or other members of the school community. Again, per Ed Code, the number of parent and or community members selected must equal the number of school staff members selected. This means that the minimum number of school site council members at an elementary school is 10. So for example, 1 principal or their designee, 1 other school personnel, 3 classroom teachers, and 5 parent and or community members. Please note that the principal or their designee is automatically a part of the school site council. No election is required there. At the secondary level, the school site council must be composed of the school staff member group and the parent community member and student group. The staff composition requirements for secondary schools are the same as the staff composition requirement for elementary schools. So the school staff members must include the principal or their designee, classroom teachers employed at the school, and other personnel employed at the school who are not teachers. Classroom teachers selected must also constitute the majority of the school staff members. The other half of the council composition at secondary schools includes parents of students attending the school or other members of the school community and students attending the school. The minimum number of school site council members for secondary schools is also 10. So another example, 1 principal or their designee, 1 other school personnel, 3 classroom teachers, and 5 other members who include parents and/or community members and students. In years past, parity was required between the parents and the community member group and the students. This is no longer the case. Thus, it is possible to have at the very least, for example, 2 student members and 3 parents and/or community members on the council, or 1 student and 4 parents and/or community members. Remember though, at the secondary schools, we must have at least 1 student on the council. Also remember that you must have at least 1 parent or community member on the council. Remember that all members of the council are selected by the respective peer group, except the principal, and achieving parity between staff members on the council and the group consisting of parents and/or community members and students is required by law. Keeping in mind the composition requirements that were shared for elementary and secondary schools on the previous slides, this chart displays a few options for school site council composition. In the first column, you can see that the minimum number of school site council members to meet composition requirements is 10 at both the elementary and secondary level. The school site council can be larger as long as it meets the composition requirements, including parity or equal number of staff members and parent community members at the elementary level, and an equal number of staff members and parent community and student members at the secondary level. Thus, with a 12-member school site council, you can see that there must be 6 on the staff member side and 6 on the parent community member side. Or if it's a secondary school, 6 on the parent community student member side. Also in that scenario, you can see that there must be 4 classroom teachers to ensure that classroom teachers make up the majority of the staff side. Please note, a middle school with 6th, 7th, and 8th grades may, but is not required to, include representation on the school site council. Likewise, junior high schools with 7th and 8th grade also have the option to include students or not. High schools must include students. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit more in depth into each member of the school site council. The principal, or his or her designee, is the only member of the school site council who is not elected. The principal or designee has voting rights on the school site council, however, may not veto any decisions made by the council or make any changes to the approved plan without the approval of the council. The role of the principal on the school site council is to set the vision and provide the school context, as well as provide information and resources to support the council with the development and the implementation of the school plan. The principal should support the work of the council by leading from the side, while also ensuring that decisions made by the council align with the school and the district's policies and vision. So, although Ed Code allows for a principal designee to serve on the school site council, it's recommended that the principal serve on the council. Some of the benefits to the principal serving on the council are that it sends the message that the work of the school site council and the development of the SPSA are important, and it also demonstrates the value of shared decision-making. The principal also plays a role in ensuring alignment between the school and district's goals and its priorities. It also provides the opportunity for the principal to build relationships with parents and the community. And also the principal plays a key role in linking the strategies in the school plan to student learning. And sometimes we get questions on who are considered classroom teachers or which staff are included in the other school personnel. So here we go. Classroom teachers are those who provide direct instruction for full time of employment. So for example, you may have intervention teachers that provide direct instruction full time. So they could be included as classroom teachers. Or You might have intervention teachers that provide direct instruction for part of the day and then support with PLCs or professional development for the other half of the day. So these teachers would be considered other school personnel because they don't provide direct instruction full time. Other school personnel basically includes any employee at the school who is not a classroom teacher, such as assistant principals, counselors, clerical staff, custodians, yard supervisors, instructional coaches, and others. There's also sometimes like the misperception or the confusion that the other school personnel only applies to classified staff. And this is not the case because certificated personnel who are not classroom teachers, such as counselors, may serve on the other school personnel category. Your board policy or your bylaws should address this so it's consistent throughout the district. The parent members of the school site council includes all parents or guardians of students enrolled in the school. The only exception is that parents who are employed at the school may not serve on the parent group side, but they may serve on the staff side. If the parent is employed by the district, but does not work at the school site, then that parent may serve on the parent side. A community member is a member of the school community who is not employed by the school and is not a parent or guardian of a student attending that school. This should also be defined in the SSC bylaws or in your district policy. It's also important to note that community members have to be elected by parents of students attending the school, and therefore community members cannot vote for school site council candidates. And as mentioned, at the secondary level, students are required to serve on the parent community student group member side. The option to serve on the school site council must be open to any student enrolled at the school, meaning the school or the district cannot set additional qualifications for membership. Student members on the school site council must be elected by the entire student body, and the election must identify the responsibilities that come with serving on the council. Move on to selection of school site council members. So per Ed Code, and as previously mentioned, school site council members must be selected by their peers. This means that classroom teachers must be selected by classroom teachers. Other school personnel who are not classroom teachers must be selected by other school personnel who are not classroom teachers. And parents and community members must be selected by parents of students attending the school. At the secondary level, students attending the school are selected by students attending the school. So since members must be selected by the peer, no seat on the school site council may be reserved for any group or individual. Ed Code does not specify how members are selected by their peers, so this can be done through a ballot process or an open meeting vote. Individuals may also self-nominate. For student members at the secondary level, a separate election must be held in which the entire student body has the opportunity to select student members. As a reminder, parent members may not be employees at the school. So while a parent who teaches at their child's school cannot be selected to represent the parent side of the school site council, they could be selected to represent the staff side as a teacher. Some schools also elect non-voting alternate members who are seated as voting members in the event of a midterm vacancy. So technically, alternate members are not official members and would not be included on your school site council roster or your membership list unless there's a vacancy. This is to ensure continuity and avoids having to hold another election to fill that spot. This is also something that should be addressed in your bylaws or in your district policy. So here are a few examples of things related to the election of school site council members that you may want to consider addressing in your board policy or in your school site council bylaws. What is the process that will be used to select school site council members and officers? How long will school site council members and officers serve? For example, is it a 2-year term for members and a 1-year term for officers? What is the process for providing notice of elections for each of the required groups? What are the responsibilities of the council? What are the responsibilities of the officers? Another consideration is a policy of non-discrimination. While not required, it is suggested that board policy or school site council bylaws address these issues as questions come up about this all the time. We'll be taking another look at bylaws a little bit later in this presentation. So Ed Code 65001 allows for some school site council exceptions for small schools. Schools with a common site administrator may operate a shared school site council if the school has less than 300 students. Up to 3 schools with a combined population of less than 1,000 students may operate as shared school site council if the schools have a shared campus or if the schools have geographic proximity to one another with similar student populations. With both of these exceptions, shared school site councils must still meet the composition requirements that were explained earlier in this presentation and specified in Ed Code 65000. Another exception is that schools with fewer than 300 pupils may operate a school site council that has all of the following: one principal, one teacher selected by teachers, one other school personnel selected by other school personnel, and 3 parents or community members selected by parents at the elementary level, or if at a secondary school, then 2 parents or community members selected by parents and 1 student selected by students. For this exception to occur, it requires approval from the local governing board and the local bargaining unit. Additionally, a school district governing board or county board of education may request on behalf of a school site council that the state board grant a waiver of any provisions related to school site councils. And finally, remember that training for school site council members is necessary to ensure that the members understand their roles and responsibilities. This training needs to ensure that members understand their legal obligations and the requirements outlined in Ed Code for school site councils. Members need training on the Green Act requirements to ensure that the council follows the requirements for holding public school site council meetings and conducting business at these meetings. Other possible training topics include training on bylaws and meeting procedures, what the Title I program is and the requirements for school-wide and targeted assistance programs, the purpose and use of state and federal funds, how to analyze student achievement data, evidence-based instructional practices, and monitoring implementation and evaluating the effectiveness of the plan and strategies. The training topics really depend on what the needs of the school site council are in order to help them fulfill their legal responsibilities.